Uh-oh. Okay, we'll start with this. It would appear that unbeaten up-and-comer from north of the border in Canada, Howling, is set to return to action next week, June 7th, on the undercard of Most Valuable Prospects 13 on DAZN against an opponent that has yet to be announced, as the fight is not yet registered on BoxRec, so we don't know here and now what exactly Bree is going to be dealing with. What we do know is that Bree is coming off of the most productive calendar year in her entire young boxing career. She saw action 3 times last year as a result of her promotional pact with King's Promotions. I'm not sure if she's still with King now.
Fighting on an MVP show?
I don't know. But what we do know is that every year, before last year, since having gone pro, Bree was only able to fight once a year for something like 3 or 4 years. Only last year did she manage to have several fights all in the same calendar year, so she now has momentum going in. On this kind of notice, though, you get the sense that it will be another developmental fight, another bring-along fight for the youngster, for the young fighter who sports a professional record of 8 wins with no losses, no draws,
2 knockouts.
Campaigning in the women's bantamweight division, that is where Dina Thorsland reigns as unified champion, where Sharita Metcalf holds the IBF and Shernika Johnson holds the WBA. That is where young Bree Howling is campaigning, and until such a time as she starts fighting in title eliminators, you can't get an ETA on when she'll be ready to challenge one of those world champions. Perhaps it's better that she doesn't. Perhaps it's better that she amasses experience.
As much as possible.
Because Bree Howling has no amateur experience, though you'd never know it to look at her, as she has the look of a much more experienced fighter than she actually is. Fluid, mid-range to inside and moving and punching on the outside. This is a fluid fighter.
A slickster.
With a mean streak. I like to think of Bree Howling as being a natural, and so she will be returning to action next week on the undercard of an MVP show. Who against? We don't know. We know that MVP has been buying up a lot of the female talent,
giving these girls a major platform to fight on with some regularity, making respectable money. And so this could serve as a segue for Bree Howling to one day get picked up by MVP. For now,
this is going to be Bree Howling's very first fight of this year, so we'll see who she ends up fighting and how she ends up looking.
In men's super middleweight news, the latest doping fiasco to rock the boxing world. I'm sure most of you have heard by now that Jaime Munguia has tested positive for a banned substance following his win over Bruno Surace in what was their rematch on the undercard of Canelo vs. Skull.
A revenge-driven win by Jaime Munguia is now at risk of being nullified. BoxingScene.com has confirmed that the former WBO junior middleweight champion tested positive for a banned substance following his May 4th win over Bruno Surace. Tijuana's Munguia, 45-2 with 35 knockouts, was credited with a unanimous decision win over Francis Surace, 26-1 with 2 draws and 5 knockouts, in their 12-round super middleweight bout on May 4th in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. However, a post-fight urinalysis revealed an adverse finding of exogenous testosterone from testing contracted to the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association. Munguia now has 10 days from the date of notice to request the testing of his B sample, which is usually the same as the A sample.
It is the same as the A sample. It's basically the same urine collected from the same day, split between 2 vials.
And that's why usually whatever you find in the A sample, you also find in the B sample, absent proof of contamination or a different result produced by the B sample, which isn't likely. The latter, an extremely rare scenario. Munguia now faces a likely suspension and fine, along with his victory changed to a no contest. The verdict change would also restore Surace's previously unbeaten record.
News of the development was first reported by Ring Magazine, owned by Turki Al Sheikh, who presented the Riyadh season event, headlined by Canelo's win over William Skull to become a 2-time undisputed super middleweight champion.
Munguia previously suffered a 6th-round knockout loss to Surace in December of last year in his hometown of Tijuana. The unlikely feat was recognized by Boxing Scene as the 2024 upset of the year. Both sides eventually agreed to terms for their rematch after a brief hiccup in such talks. The sequel moved to Riyadh, and Munguia linked up with new trainer Eddie Reynoso, best known for his long work with Canelo Alvarez. Munguia was winning until he wasn't in their initial meeting, but offered a more disciplined and measured approach in their rematch.
It's the ironic part that Jaime, in spite of testing positive for a banned substance, he wasn't overly aggressive.
Nothing really stood out from the performance aside from subtle changes to his fight mechanics. The drug testing result now casts a cloud over the feat, as Munguia will have to appear before the British Boxing Board of Control, the presiding commission for the event. It will leave the 28-year-old super middleweight contender with just 1 win in his last 4 starts. And that's an important tidbit. It's important to note that the BBBOC are the ones who preside over all the fights in Saudi Arabia, and they tend to dish out much harsher and longer suspensions than any commission in America. I remember when Zolani Tete tested positive for a banned substance.
Zolani Tete!
He was issued a 4-year ban. Not the customary 6 months to a year that you see in America. They banned him from boxing on British soil for 4 years. And it was the same with Ryan Martin before that. After the Tosh Jailer fight, it came out that Ryan Martin of America tested positive for a banned substance, and he also was issued a 4-year ban. With the BBBOC, they don't just give you a slap on the wrist like they do in America.
So you have to wonder, are they about to hit Jaime Munguia with a 4-year ban?
They might. But all that really means for Jaime is that he won't be able to box in either Saudi Arabia or the United Kingdom for, presumably, 4 years. The kicker is, Jaime doesn't regularly fight in those places anyway. He's based out of America.
So then the question is, if the BBBOC bans you for 4 years, do the commissions in America also adhere to such a ban?
I don't think so. I don't think being banned in the UK for 4 years means you won't be able to box in America. You will remember that when Conor Benn was going through his whole situation with the BBBOC, he came here and he boxed here 2 times. The commissions here are a lot more freewheeling than the one in the UK.
And Saudi. So at minimum, this would eliminate him from any Riyadh season shows happening in that region of the world, but I don't think it would stop him from boxing in either America or his native Mexico.
The other stain, that Jaime Munguia is the 3rd Eddie Reynoso fighter to test positive for a banned substance while fighting in his gym. First it was Canelo Alvarez many years ago, then it was Oscar Valdez, and now it's Jaime Munguia.
What about Ryan? Didn't he test positive for something?
He did, but that wasn't while he was at Eddie Reynoso's gym. When he tested positive for Osterin, he was being trained by Derek James, so Ryan technically doesn't count.
Back to Jaime.
It's very bad optics for the Reynoso gym that as soon as Jaime Munguia starts training with them, that's as soon as it took for him to pop for a banned substance. My honest opinion on the whole thing and doping in the sport of boxing is there's nothing happening at Eddie Reynoso's gym that isn't also happening at Jose Benavidez's gym or Dominic Ingles' gym.
You'd have to be pretty naive to think that the only guys doping in this sport are the guys that Eddie trains. What about all these guys that pop hot that don't train with Eddie Reynoso?
Now, I didn't wait until Jaime Munguia tested positive for a banned substance to come to the conclusion that perhaps most of the sport is doping. Most of the fighters you see on your television, and Jaime is just one of the ones that got caught, because this keeps happening. The fighters are innocent until they're not.
So do you think that Bruno is doping too?
Not really. Not that guy. Nothing about Bruno really stands out. He doesn't have a lot of knockouts. He's not the fastest, not the strongest.
Nothing about Bruno Sirache jumps out at you. So I don't really get the sense that he's doping per se, but the top level guys, the top shelf fighters, the ones you always hear about and the ones you always see on your TV screens, I'm of the opinion that most, if not all of them, could be doping, and Jaime's just one of the bozos that got caught.
It seems to happen at every level of the sport, with the men, with the women, with the prospects, with the contenders, and even some champions, high-profile ones, like Canelo, like Tyson Fury.
Seems like every other month, some well-known fighter in the sport, whether it's a man or a woman, a champion or a contender, is testing positive for a banned substance. Last year it was Ryan, this year it's Jaime Munguia.
And the way I see it, everybody might be on something, which would also mean that everybody's just playing dumb.
But if everybody's on something, then why even contract VADA? Why hire an anti-doping association?
It may not be for the reasons that people think in some effort to clean up a sport that knows it's dirty. Sometimes I think they hire VADA to handicap the other fighter.
Make it harder for the other fighter to use their gear.
Which in turn will affect that fighter's performance, effectively handicapping that fighter. That's one reason why they might contract an anti-doping agency. And another is to cover all the bases. Liability.
Provides assurance to the promoter that's paying for the show that they did everything they could to make it an even playing field. But beyond that, it's out of their hands.
Some guy goes in there juiced to the gills and hurts another guy. Well, it won't be the promoter's fault, because the promoter tried to keep things clean, tried to keep things fair. Even though those same promoters know what's going on, they're just covering their own asses. You go in there juiced to the gills, it won't be our fault.
Jaime got caught in the act, but I'm cynical.
So I'm not surprised. I don't get surprised anymore by stories like this.
Desensitized.
That doesn't mean that I was suspicious of Jaime the whole time. That means I'm suspicious of everybody in the sport, not just him. So when another Joe Blow pops hot for a banned substance, I'm not surprised.
Are you?
I saw veteran boxing scribe Stephen Kimothy react to the news by saying, if you're not at least suspicious of the Reynoso camp at this point, I don't know what to say. Once is an aberration. Twice is a coincidence. 3 times? That's a trend. That's a pattern. How many times is it now? And what does that make that?
The industry standard, as far as I can tell.
It's not even about exonerating the Reynoso gym of culpability. They're guilty. I think they're guilty. The thing is, I don't think they're the only ones. I think this is the industry standard. And I think everybody's just playing dumb, looking the other way.
Jaime Munguia's name is added to a very long list of fighters that got caught in the act. Wasn't the first, won't be the last. That's all I can say.
In men's heavyweight news, more on the proposed deal for Anthony Joshua to box in Saudi for what remains of his career. He's in talks for a 2-fight deal, not a 3-fight deal like initially reported, that could see him fighting either Jared Anderson or his old buddy, Dillian Whyte. Eddie Hearn has revealed that Anthony Joshua is in discussion with Turki El Sheikh and Riyadh Season regarding a potential 2-fight deal. Joshua's most recent 2 contests have come under the Riyadh Season banner.
His second-round stoppage over Francis Ngannou in March of 2024, and the 5th-round knockout defeat to Daniel Dubois 6 months later. There had been talk about a rematch with Daniel Dubois, but Anthony instead chose to have surgery on his injured elbow. Hearn revealed the boxing scene earlier this week that the surgery had been a success, and that Joshua would return to full training at around 6 weeks. It was subsequently reported by No Smoke Boxing that Anthony Joshua is in talks with Riyadh Season over a 3-fight deal.
Yeah, that's not true. We're actually discussing a 2-fight deal with Riyadh Season, Hearn told Boxing Scene. We've been doing that. Turkey LL Sheik said on the night that Canelo fought William Skull when we had our meeting, and that's the plan, really. We want to box sometime this year, October, November, December. Hearn wants to see what happens in the July 19th rematch between Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois, both of whom have beaten Joshua before confirming anything. Tyson Fury has long flirted with a comeback and would immediately be linked to Joshua should he return.
Yeah, otherwise why come back? What other fighters out there for Tyson Fury that would pay him a fortune? That he should even come back or consider it?
We'll see what happens with Dubois and Usyk. We'll see what happens with Fury, he said of a potential opponent. And if we don't fight those guys, we'll fight. And then maybe we'll follow one of those guys next year. Hearn confirmed that both Dillian Whyte and Jared Anderson have also been mentioned as potential opponents for Anthony. 2 guys that have been discussed, but nothing's concrete, Hearn said of the rumors. I would rather see Anthony face some new blood, some fresh meat. I would actually prefer to see Anthony fight Jared Anderson than Dillian Whyte. Talks for a rematch with Anthony and Dillian have been off and on for years now.
The last time their rematch fell apart was because Dillian once again tested positive for a banned substance,
like Jaime Munguia just did. But that's why it fell apart the last time. As a boxing fan, I'd watch it, but I don't have a hankering for it. I don't have a deep desire to see Anthony and Dillian fight again, because when they fought the last time years ago, Anthony smoked him. He knocked him out.
It wasn't controversial, so what need is there for a rematch?
Now, Jared Anderson has since rebounded off his loss to Martin Bakole. Needless to say, he didn't look impressive, but then again, neither did Anthony, getting smoked by Daniel Dubois. So I would rather see a fight between them. I'd be more interested in that. And I think that Jared Anderson would be up for it.
Because of the money.
And because Anthony Joshua is perceived as being damaged goods. But is he so damaged that Jared Anderson would beat him? That Jared Anderson could knock him out? See, that question, that's the intrigue. We don't know. We don't know if Anthony has enough left to beat a Jared Anderson, or if he's so damaged and so past it, Anderson knocks him out.
We already saw Dillian and Anthony fight. Bring in some new blood, some fresh meat.
The other reason I think Jared Anderson would take it is because he's not long for the sport of boxing. I remember a quote from him before he lost to Martin Bakole, that he's not really in it for legacy, he's just gonna make his money, take his money, and run.
That attitude has shown up in his performances. He's only in it for the big bucks. While fighting Anthony, you can make some.
It's intriguing enough that I would prefer to see that. Now, as far as a Tyson Fury fight, I think Tyson Fury's on the comeback trail. He just uploaded a video of himself back in the gym.
What the hell would he be doing back there if he's retired? Happily retired, like he said a few days ago. He's just dangling that carrot and building up the momentum and the desire to see him return. That if Tyson Fury's coming back for anybody, it's gotta be for Anthony Joshua, because there ain't no other money fights out there.
He's already been a champion, he's already been unified and all the bells and whistles. If he's coming back now, he's coming back for the money. And fighting Anthony pays him the most money.